Hello and welcome and thanks for tuning in. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's what's coming up on the show tonight. What happens when your currency is in free fall? What happens when you can't afford basic necessities? What happens when a nationwide power outage doesn't shock anyone? This is the current reality of Pakistan. The people of Pakistan are suffering, they're crying for help. And what are the leaders doing about it? Blaming the opposition or simply bowing down to every demand of the International Monetary Fund. Why are they doing that? Because there is no other option. Its national debt has never been higher, so how is a country going to pay for essentials? Just think about that. Tonight on Gravitas, I'll show you the ground reality in Pakistan, not what the leaders are professing in interviews, not what the opposition is claiming, not what global powers are saying at the moment, but what the common man in Pakistan is witnessing every day. Also on the show, we've seen the wreckage, the devastating loss and suffering caused by the twin quakes that hit Turkey and Syria. We've looked at the mounting death toll with great sadness, but as buildings around us fall like a pack of cards, as bodies keep piling up, have you asked, why is the earth angry? We move on to a story that we've told you countless times sadly. Gun violence in America refuses to die down. What causes this senseless killing? What has led to a child's safety coming into question in broad daylight in a country which claims to be a superpower? I ask you tonight, would you feel safe sending your child to a school in America when any armed shooter can go on a rampage? And guess what? Queen Consort Camilla will not wear the Kohinoor diamond at the upcoming coronation. That's what the Buckingham Palace says. Unfortunately, this diplomatic move will do little to assuage Indian sentiments. We'll talk about this priceless diamond again tonight. All this coming up on the show. Was the partition of India in 1947 a terrible mistake? Would Pakistan have been better off as a part of united India? These are not my questions. These are questions the people of Pakistan are asking themselves. And I can't blame them for it. Their country's economy is in the I.C.U. Prices of fuel and basic necessities are shooting up to astronomical levels. The currency is currently in free fall. Forex reserves are around just $2.5 billion. The national debt has never been higher. The IMF will not lend any more foreign exchange, not without strict conditions that have now created a virtual civil war at the highest levels of Pakistan's government. This concoction of misery, this continuing collapse has left many ordinary Pakistanis with an overwhelming sense of doom. And you can gauge this sense of doom from the viral YouTube videos like these. They were shot on the streets where Pakistan's ordinary citizens live, not in the mansions of the political elite, but in the bustling markets of Karachi and Lahore. The common man has a common dread, the fear of an impending doomsday. Yes, the people of Pakistan fear a political apocalypse. A complete collapse of the polity and the economy. Why? I'm going to tell the story in figures now due to the prevailing state of affairs. Just look at the statistics. The rate of inflation has touched 27.6%. That's a 48-year high. The Pakistani rupee is trading at 267.4 against the dollar. And if we speak of fuel prices, petrol is currently selling at 272 rupees per litre. Diesel is selling at rupees 262 per litre. Kerosene at 217 rupees per litre. The price of milk has increased from 190 rupees per litre to 210. And if we speak of chicken prices, 1 kilogram of chicken now costs 700 to 780 Pakistani rupees. And if we speak of boneless chicken meat, it has hit a new high of a whopping 1,000 rupees per kg. Such is the state of affairs, where the prices of edibles, of daily essentials have become unaffordable for most Pakistanis. And everyone is blaming just about everyone else. Shopkeepers are blaming the distributors for charging them at a whim. The distributors in turn are blaming retailers, the retailers are blaming wholesalers, and the wholesalers are blaming the animal. Yes, they say that milk production has fallen drastically. And as for chicken, birds have disappeared from poultry farms. I wonder where they've gone. In any case, what are Pakistan's leaders doing about it? The present government is accusing the former finance minister of treason. Yes, at a time when many Pakistanis cannot even afford basic necessities, the Pakistani leadership, the government, can only think of revenge. Revenge against the opposition. Take the case of Shaukat Tareen, the former finance minister of Pakistan. He has been booked under sedition. What for? For trying to derail the IMF deal. Let me explain. Last year, a new audio leak had surfaced. The audio was of a man, allegedly Tareen, instructing PTI leaders to lay hurdles in Pakistan's bid to secure an IMF bailout, a crucial IMF bailout. The audio tapes emerged in August last year. 6 months on, Shaukat Tareen has been charged with sedition. And now, returning to today's woes, what has happened to the IMF bailout? Is Pakistan closer to securing it? Not really. The bailout remains stalled, courtesy the IMF's strict conditions. It wants Pakistan to impose reform that will hurt. New taxes, to raise tariffs on natural gas prices. And Islamabad doing this. It has no other option. Look at this headline now. In its bid to secure the bailout, Pakistan has nearly doubled gas prices. And if reports are to be believed, it is expected to announce a similar rise in the price of electricity. Who will this affect? This shows you the kind of dominance the IMF enjoys in Pakistan. When the IMF gives orders, Pakistan's desperate government succumbs. Pakistan's old friends, be it Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar and China, are no longer ready to pour money into Pakistan's national begging bowl. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif described this begging as humiliating. But today, he has to bow down before the IMF whiplash, while the country shivers in what might be called a high IMF fever. That said, this reform needs bipartisan support to be taken forward. But the sheer personal hatred between the ruling Sharif family and the opposition leader Imran Khan makes agreement impossible. The country's president is from Imran Khan's party, the PTI, on instructions from his real boss. He has now become an obstacle to the government. Look at this next headline now. Alvi has refused to approve a mini-budget ordinance that was supposed to raise taxes to secure the IMF bailout in question. The Pakistani president says that the government should take the parliament into confidence before making such a move, that it needs to get the consent of all lawmakers to raise taxes. So what does all this tell you? That the biggest hurdle to Pakistan's success, the biggest obstacle to Pakistan's recovery, are Pakistan's politicians. The country has no money left, but it has no shortage of gas bags. While they try and destroy one another, it is Pakistan, the people of Pakistan, which are suffering. Pakistan is being destroyed to the point where many are saying what was earlier unthinkable, that maybe the creation of Pakistan wasn't such a good idea after all. Moving on to another question. Is the earth angry? Because it has been going through a lot lately. You can see it all around you. The question might seem absurd, but the natural events that have occurred in the last few days have forced me to ask this tonight. How much more can the earth take? Humans interfere too much with nature. This isn't news. But nature is now fighting back with great fury. Earthquakes in Turkey and Syria are the latest examples. The countries were hit by 3 earthquakes in less than 12 hours. They were all above the magnitude of 6. The first one being the most deadly, with a 7.8 magnitude. More than 41,000 people have died. Millions are currently in need of humanitarian aid. But did you ever ask, why did this happen? Why are earthquakes getting more deadly and frequent? According to statistics, there were over 2,200 earthquakes in the year 2021. The numbers are astounding. 16 of these were higher than 7 on the Richter scale. 3 were higher than 8. Experts are now predicting that there will be more of such calamities, more deadly and more frequent. I don't mean to scare you, but warnings have been issued for India as well. You see, some areas are more prone to earthquakes than others. Do you know about the tectonic plates? These are the bits that make up the Earth's crust. So when pressure builds up on these plates, the Earth's surface jerks and earthquakes occur. The plates are particularly unpredictable in some areas of the world, and these are known as the seismic zones. Let's take a look at the riskiest one now. The map is on your screens now. The Circum-Pacific Belt is the world's greatest earthquake belt. You might have heard about it. It's popularly known as the Ring of Fire. The majority of Earth's earthquakes, as high as 81% of them, take place along this Ring of Fire. It is located along the rim of the Pacific Ocean, tracing the boundaries along several tectonic plates. While India is not located on this belt, it still has a history of devastating earthquakes. So should you be scared? Probably yes. According to the National Institute of Disaster Management, 59% of Indian landmass is prone to earthquakes. 59%. The national capital, Delhi, lies in the second highest seismic zone. But earthquakes are not the only thing to be scared of. Sea levels are also rising at an unprecedented rate. The UN Secretary General has given a stark warning. Listen in now.
Consequences of all of these are unthinkable. Low-lying communities and the entire countries could disappear forever. We would witness a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale. And we would see ever fiercer competition for fresh water, land and other resources.
A score of countries and big cities are at an alarming risk of rising sea levels. This includes Bangladesh, China, India and the Netherlands. Big cities such as Mumbai, London, Los Angeles, New York, Shanghai and Bangkok are also on this list. The danger is especially acute for nearly 900 million people who live in coastal zones at low elevations. Now that accounts for 1 out of 10 people on Earth. Global warming is only worsening. Climate change is boiling up the planet. Glaciers and ice sheets are melting. According to NASA, Antarctica is shedding some 150 billion tons of ice mass annually. Greenland's ice cap is shrinking even faster. It is losing 270 billion tons of ice every year. So what's happening? What does it make you think? The Earth is suffering. The signs are all around us. It's high time we take action. It's too late for lip service. We now move on to India. The Maharaja is back. Yes, we are talking about India's most loved airline, Air India. It has signed one of the biggest deals in the history of civil aviation. Air India will buy 470 new aircraft. 250 of them will be supplied by Airbus. 220 will come from Boeing. And this happens to be the biggest ever order placed by the airline. It's the first since the Tata Group took over the debt-ridden carrier from the Indian government. Air India will get its first aircraft later this year, and the bulk of the planes will arrive starting the year 2025. Air India's revival is the talk of town. On the line is India's ambition to become a global aviation hub, much like London, Frankfurt or Dubai. To that end, Air India has signed a massive 470 aircraft deal. Let me tell you more about it. Airbus, which has the backing of the French government, will supply 40 Airbus A350s. It will also manufacture 210 Airbus A320s and an A321neo for Air India. The US-based aviation giant Boeing will deliver 20 Boeing 787s, 10 Boeing 777-9 wide-body planes, and 190 Boeing 737 MAX single-aisle planes. And these aren't the only companies involved in this historic deal. The A350s will be powered by engines from Rolls-Royce, which is a British company. The Boeing 777s and the 787s will have engines developed by GE Aerospace or General Electric, an American company. CFM International engines will power Boeing 737 MAX single-aisle planes. Now, CFM is a joint venture between General Electric and Francis Safran. To put it simply, the Air India deal is being backed by 4 governments: India, France, the United States and the United Kingdom. The governments of France, the US and the UK are definitely happy. After all, billions of dollars in cash flows are expected from the Indian carrier. Several thousands of jobs will be created in these nations. Remember, the aircraft deal comes against the backdrop of an economic slowdown, which is more pronounced in the Western economies as of now. The leaders of the US, the UK and France have hailed the deal. President Biden spoke to India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and here's what the White House said about the call. President Biden noted how the sale will support more than 1 million American jobs across 44 states and help Air India meet growing demands for air transportation in India. Yes, the Air India deal will create 1 million new American jobs. Meanwhile, Downing Street has said that the deal would create thousands of highly skilled jobs and generate at least £450 million of investment in the UK. Going back, Prime Minister Modi and the French President jointly announced a deal over a video call. Listen in to what the Indian Prime Minister had to say.
कई आकलनों के अनुसार भारत को अगले 15 वर्षों में 2000 से अधिक विमानों की आवश्यकता होगी। आज की ऐतिहासिक घोषणा इस बढ़ती मांग को पूरा करने में सहायक होगी।
The third biggest aviation market. Yes, Prime Minister Modi also backs India becoming the hub for maintenance operations. The future of Indian aviation is certainly bright. And as for Air India, the Maharaja is on a revival path to regain its lost glory. Our next story comes from the United States. It is about 21-year-old Jackie Matthews. She is an undergrad student. Her story, unfortunately, is deeply linked to America's gun violence epidemic. She was present at the Michigan State University campus on Monday. That's where a gunman killed 3 people on campus. Matthews was at her campus home. She was physically unharmed, but mentally she couldn't have been worse. Why? Because Matthews just lived through her second mass shooting. In 2012, she was present at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, where one of America's deadliest mass shootings took place. 26 people were killed in that shooting, but Matthews survived with minor injuries to the back. And that was because she was hunched for so long in a classroom corner. Worse, she suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. She still has flashbacks. She calls America's gun violence problem incomprehensible. Listen in.
The fact that this is the second mass shooting that I have now lived through is incomprehensible. My heart goes out to all the families and the friends of the victims of this Michigan State shooting. But we can no longer just provide love and prayers. It needs to be legislation. It needs to be action. It's not okay. We can no longer allow this to happen. We can no longer be complacent.
And then there are those who witnessed their first mass shooting. I want you to listen to a Michigan shooting eyewitness now.
We like our doors, like we put our couches like up against them. It was a very scary time. I'm not gonna lie, because then you'd walk by and you'd hear people walking down the hallways too. Like you didn't know what was going on, and like we would like hear like a bunch of like fake news and stuff. Like you didn't know like what to understand and like what to hear. It was really scary. I'm not gonna lie.
But this story is about Jackie Matthews. If you are in America, you could sense the dread that she's experiencing. If you are an American citizen, you must be as clueless as she is. Why? Because America's gun violence problem is only getting worse. More than 600 fatal mass shootings were recorded in 2020, 2021 and 2022. Just 2 months into 2023, the US has already recorded 67 incidents. Worse, there is no solution in sight to this gun violence epidemic. The Biden administration has passed a gun safety law and some executive reform, but the let-up in violence has been minimal. After the Michigan shooting, Biden has renewed his demand for more reform. Listen in now.
We took a big step toward passing the most significant bipartisan gun legislation in 30 years. Ghost guns and other things, background checks, but there's a lot more work to do. And I'm committing to getting it done with all of you. Some of you know that, and I'm going to say something that's always controversial, but there is no rationale for assault weapons and magazines that hold 50, 70 bullets.
Here's what Biden is demanding in order to control gun violence. More background checks, a ban on assault weapons, safe storage of guns, doing away with immunity for gun makers selling war weapons. But as always, the gun reform proposed by Biden faces a formidable roadblock from the Republicans, of course. For the gun lobby, the right to bear arms is enshrined in the Constitution. They will defend the Second Amendment to their death. The gun reform in Michigan, for instance, was blocked by Republicans last year. Meanwhile, amid the partisan shooting and bickering, it is the American people who continue to live in fear. So this story is not about laws alone or political ideology. This story is about human safety. I ask you, would you feel safe sending your child to school in America? Would you feel safe as a teacher walking among students in corridors? Would you as a parent be able to focus on work knowing that news of mass senseless shootings are making headlines daily? And that too in a country that claims to be a global superpower. A dream destination for work and family, a country where just about anyone, man, woman, child, can walk into a school, a mall, a park with a handgun and fire at anyone who comes in the way. Moving on now, let's now shift our focus to North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom. A land ruled by a feudal dynasty, a family that doesn't want the common man of North Korea to have the same names as them. I'm sure some of you might know this. If you're a North Korean, you can't share the name of the supreme leader, Kim Jong-un. No newborn can be given this name, and those who already had this name have been forced to amend it already. Now, one would assume the absurdity would end there, but it hasn't. Look at this headline now. North Korea is now forcing people with the same name as Kim Jong-un's daughter to change it. We're talking about a 10-year-old Ju A. She recently made her first public appearance, and now authorities don't want North Koreans to have the same name. I know the story is absurd, but it raises a significant question. Is this diktat an indication that Ju A has been anointed as her father's heir? Our next report explores more.
They say if you want to enter politics, it helps if you come from the right family, the right dynasty, or have the right name, like Kim Jong-un, a name synonymous with power in North Korea. But if you're a North Korean, you can't use this name. Don't ask why, because it belongs to the country's supreme leader, a person that can get away by shooting his uncle, or killing his stepbrother, or for that matter, banning anyone from having the same name as his daughter. Yes, after laying a copyright on his name, Kim Jong-un now doesn't want North Koreans to share his daughter's name. Reports say Kim's officials are compelling anyone called Ju-ai to change their name. Here's what a recent media report states. The Safety Department of Cheongju, North Pyongyang Province, on February 8th summoned women who are registered under the name of Ju-ai and ordered them to change their names. The question is why? The answer is why not? Kim Jong-un rules North Korea by decree. His wish is the people's command. But another reason behind this move could be the regime's effort to idolate the young girl. And why would it try to idolate her? Because Ju-ai could very well be North Korea's next leader. And as the leader, she can't have the same name as her subjects. This practice may sound bizarre, but it's not entirely new. It dates back to the era of Kim Il-sung, the founder of the North Korean regime. During his rule, people were banned from having the same name as him. The same happened during the era of Kim Jong-il, and once again when Kim Jong-un came to power. Now, a new possible successor has emerged. The state media has already given her all sorts of titles. Some are calling her the adorable daughter, others are calling her the noble daughter, and yet others say she's the respected daughter. So how can anybody possibly have the same name as such an adored, noble, and respected individual, one who might just replace the supreme leader in the near future? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
King Charles III's coronation is fast approaching, and with that, questions are looming around the Kohinoor. One of history's most celebrated diamonds, and as it turns out, the most contested one too. The jewel was at risk of kicking off another dispute whether Camilla, the Queen Consort, would wear it in her crown or not. And the Buckingham Palace has now answered that question. It has made it clear that Camilla will not wear the Kohinoor. The diamond is currently set in Queen Elizabeth's crown. She used it for her coronation as Queen Consort to King George VI. But it will not be passed down to Camilla. Instead, she will wear a crown that belonged to Queen Mary, who was the Queen Consort before Elizabeth. The palace says the decision is aimed at sustainability and efficiency. After all, an existing crown is going to be reused instead of a new commission. How noble. But the palace seems to have made a diplomatic decision here. Why do I say that? Because the Kohinoor stirs up a lot of emotions. It brings up the dark memories of colonization in India. Let me tell you a little bit more about it. The Kohinoor is one of the world's largest cut diamonds. It weighs around 105.6 carats. The jewel is believed to be priceless, but it is estimated to be worth more than $400 million. While it had been changing hands since the 16th century, it remained in the Indian subcontinent till the British looted it. The jewel was seized from an 11-year-old Indian prince back in 1840. It was then presented to Queen Victoria, and since then it has been in British possession. The Kohinoor was reputed to be a gift from India. It is highly questionable. The British make no official mention of the violent history behind acquiring it. So let me ask, looting from a defeated prince does not really qualify as a present, does it? Controversy surrounding the Kohinoor never really dies down. Indians feel wronged. The colonizers not only made Indians suffer, they tried to steal their heritage too. And let's not forget, the Kohinoor is a huge symbol of this heritage. But now it remains in the Tower of London, behind a glass for Indian tourists to look at, to admire. Imagine having to admire from a distance something that is rightfully yours. Imagine having to pay in foreign currency to view a symbol of your own heritage. The Indian government has repeatedly asked for the diamond to be returned, but the requests have only fallen on deaf ears. In 2010, then Prime Minister David Cameron vowed that the Kohinoor would continue to stay put in Britain. The UK is convinced with its made-up stories about the diamond being a so-called gift. It argues that there are no legal grounds for returning it. Shortly after Queen Elizabeth passed away in September, the Kohinoor began trending on Twitter. Indians raised the question of the diamond being featured in yet another coronation because the royals don't miss the opportunity to flaunt this priceless jewel. As if the theft wasn't stinging enough, now tensions are lurking around King Charles's coronation. But the Buckingham Palace has made a diplomatic decision by excluding the Kohinoor from the coronation. It has sidestepped the possibility of conflict and debate. But my question is this: is this really enough? Shouldn't the diamond be returned? It has been more than 75 years. The East India Company doesn't exist anymore. Colonization is a dark chapter of the history. When everyone has decided to move on, to move forward, why not return what rightfully belongs to India? I have a rather outrageous question for all of you. Who let the dogs get high? The dogs in New York are nauseous. They're wobbling on the streets of New York. They're dazed and confused. Why? Because they're high on weed. Yes, you heard me right. This is a rather strange story coming from the streets of New York. Dogs are getting sick. Their heads are bobbling. They're stoned. It's a warning which has come from veterinarians and poison control centers in the city. You see, dogs are chomping on remains of joints and other cannabis products. They're unwitting customers of weed, and no, they're not hiding in any alleys, indulging in questionable activities. They're simply on the right side of the law. You see, marijuana is widely available in New York City. The city legalized the adult recreational use of the drug back in 2021. And so, now New Yorkers can head to a legal dispensary and buy the drug. But it seems they're being a bit careless about how they dispose of the drug, because their pooches, their pampered pooches, are accidentally chomping on a joint during their evening strolls. Vets say that these cases are only going up and the symptoms are a story worth telling. Dogs have trouble walking, they lose their balance, they have dilated pupils, they're sleepy, they even hallucinate. Time now for a small chemistry lesson. Marijuana happens to be also known as cannabis or weed. It refers to dried flowers, stems and seeds of the cannabis plant. These contain mind-altering compounds, and according to the US CDC, medical marijuana is commonly used for pain management. But there's a flip side to all this too. Frequent use of marijuana in high doses can cause disorientation. It can even lead to anxiety and paranoia. Now, the year 2022 will be remembered for many things, and one of them is the legalization of recreational cannabis among adults in different parts of America. US President Joe Biden pardoned several federal offenses of simple marijuana possession. Public support for legalizing this drug remains at an all-time high. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center, an overwhelming share of US adults, 88%, say that marijuana should be legal for medical and recreational use by adults. And so, many states are authorizing the legal use of marijuana. But clearly, when dogs on the streets are unwittingly getting stoned, there's a problem at hand. It raises questions about a drug landing in the hands of the wrong person, or worse, a minor. With cannabis products being easily available, there are risks to be considered. For instance, a new study found that the ingestion of edibles by children under 3 has risen rapidly since the start of the pandemic. This has led to hospitalizations. To legalize marijuana or not is a debate for another day. But when your dog starts hallucinating, when your pet starts wobbling and running in circles, when your furry friend starts acting funny, you better scour the streets for that joint, because your dog could be stoned. Moving on, a massive child sexual abuse scandal has rocked the Catholic Church in Portugal. The church members molested more than 4,800 children in the last 70 years. Most of the victims were 10 to 14-year-olds. The youngest of them was a 2-year-old. And just a few of these cases have been investigated. The shocking findings were published by an independent panel. The panel was formed last January. Take a look at this next detailed report.
It's a déjà vu moment for the Catholic Church. In country after country, the Catholic clergy has indulged in pedophile behavior. After France, Ireland, Australia, Germany, and the United States, it is the turn of Portugal. A country where 80% of the population is Catholic. Portugal's commission began its probe last January. That was after a similar scandal rocked France. The commission spoke to more than 500 victims. It is warned that what has been found is just the tip of the iceberg.
These testimonies, as we will explain ahead carefully, allow us to reach a much more extensive victim network, calculated at a minimum number, absolute minimum, of 4,815 victims.
The commission says 77% of the perpetrators were priests, and most of the victims were men. Most of the cases happened at Catholic schools, priests' homes, and confessionals. The Portuguese Catholic Church has tendered a wholehearted apology to victims.
I would love to say that, but I don't. I cannot say it. What I can say is that we have a different consciousness today. It wasn't easy for us to go down this path either, but we did it because we had to. It is essential to have the truth.
All said and done, bringing the guilty to justice remains a challenge. Only 25 testimonies heard by the Commission have been sent for prosecution. What about other cases? Under Portuguese law, offences committed over 20 years ago are no longer liable for prosecution. But the Commission has called for extending the time frame to 30 years. And more victims have been urged to speak up. Meanwhile, the upcoming visit of Pope Francis to Portugal has become all the more significant. The Pope is expected to meet some of the victims during his August visit.
Now I have a scary question for you. Can you ever imagine losing your job? Chew on that thought a little. What about the house rent or the mortgage, the never-ending bills, the insurance covers, your child's school fee and monthly installments? It won't be an exaggeration to say that the very thought of getting fired can send chills down your spine. But there's one generation that is built slightly differently. I'm talking about Gen Z. This young generation never fails to amaze me. While we assume that youngsters are all about the grind or that they thrive on hustle culture, they also have a different side. A side which is open to explore the world. They want to take time to figure things out in their own sweet time. Make careers out of their hobbies. And I'm not just saying that, a recent trend in America proves my point. As we've been reporting, job cuts are roiling firms from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. But some employees stuck in the storm are taking it easy. They are not scared of being laid off. If anything, they are loving it. As I told you, Gen Z is full of surprises. The younger cohort is taking a more relaxed view of unemployment, of getting fired. It is seeing it as a way to escape. Escape from positions that they didn't like in the first place. Escape from the rat race, the fight to the top. They are delighted to spend more time on hobbies, try a different career path, or patiently wait for better opportunities. New data by the market research company Harris Poll shows similar sentiments. Nearly 20% of Gen Z or Zoomers say that they would be happy if they were laid off today. Imagine that. Millennials, the slightly older generation, is also not too behind. 15% of millennials say that they won't mind losing their jobs. Now, of course, comfortable layoffs are a privilege. But for some, the strong labour market is removing the anxiety of getting fired. How is that? The employment sector is rather off these days. Tens of thousands of people were laid off from big tech companies. I'm talking about Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Twitter. But despite that, the unemployment rate fell to its lowest level since 1969. The ratio of job openings to unemployed people hit a near record high of 1.9 in December. There are plenty of job openings. According to recent data, more than half of recent hires found their new roles within a month. Usually there's a gap of weeks, even months, between a layoff and the start of a new job. But that is not the case anymore. Workers find new jobs through simple LinkedIn posts. The job market is helping Gen Z relax a little, but it is simply an add-on to their risk-taking attitude. Career coaches say these employment crises can help people take fresh risks. It also lets them embrace changes that they may never have otherwise considered. Sometimes the stability of a job can stop you from unlocking your highest potential, they say. The golden handcuffs of retirement plans and high salaries can prevent you from taking risks, but a layoff can nudge you into uncharted territory, a new path perhaps, that could be more rewarding than your current job or your old career. And God forbid, if you struggle with financial issues, you can always rely on the good old bank of mum and dad. At least that's what Gen Z does. Yes, you heard me right. The bank of mum and dad, it's the best kind of bank there is. Loans are handed out with great generosity. The repayment plan is foggy. Take as long as you need, says your relationship manager, in this case your parent. The bank of mum and dad won't hound you as long as you promise to attend all family dinners religiously without fail. What do I mean? Well, an economic think tank has revealed in the United Kingdom, parents dole out large sums of cash to help their children get along with key life events. It could be for buying a house, getting married, or for education, among many other things. Between 2018 and 2020, Britons gave or informally lent each other cash and assets worth $20.5 billion a year. The majority of handouts were from parents to adult children. Britons gave their adult children almost $17 billion, $17 billion a year. Now that's an insanely large amount, isn't it? You would think that this brave generation Gen Z could get by without a loan. You would think that Gen Z has it easy because they have their parents to back them up. But that's not always the case. If you do belong to this generation, listen to me. At the moment, we're all dealing with soaring inflation. Job increments barely cover the rising costs of living. Medical or energy bills are longer than ever. Depending on which country you live in, one medical emergency and your entire savings could be wiped out, just like that. And let's not forget that big tech did lay off tens of thousands of employees, even if Gen Z acted all cool about it. It's possibly because they have a bank to fall back on, the conveniently available bank of mum and dad. And on that note, it's time to wrap up Gravitas for tonight. Thanks for watching with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images.
Take away the pain and grief of our injustice. I hope one of your friends. Take away the pain and grief and sorrow everything better.